Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. This episode, I want to get a little bit more into the woo-woo aspect of it, looking at this subject from a space of what may have been and what was the reasoning behind having these amazing buildings and structures constructed and then demolished very soon afterwards. And there's the mainstream narrative around it and the historical narrative that we've been given, of course, is that these World's Fairs were constructed over a 2 to 3 year time period. They were open for a 6 to 9 month period for people to visit, and then they were demolished, and that's what they were intended to be demolished. So, in this episode, I want to look at perhaps some of the reasoning as to why they were demolished from let's say, a more conspiratorial point of view, and just looking at some of the uh, images that we have and some of the analysis that we have from what may have been happening in the 19th century as far as construction and technology goes. So I'm going to run through some bullet point aspects of it. So if this hypothesis is true, then that these buildings were that I have and many others, that these buildings were indeed built for century, like potentially centuries earlier than the roughly 1850s to 1910, 1912, up until say World War One. If they were built during that time period, uh, and then um, and then demolished, or if they were built, I should say, previous to that time period that we're being told, so in a 2, 3, 4, 500 years previous, and then they were demolished by this new uh, realm or governing body or whatever it may be, then why would it be? So uh, the erasure of a civilization, the theory that I have is that it could be the erasure of a civilization with advanced energy and building technologies that couldn't be metered or commodified. So meaning that there was a energy technology to go with a building technology uh, that was utilized by a civilization slash society that, because it wasn't um, centralized and easily able to be commodified by a person or a group of people, that technology had to go for the technology that we find ourselves in today, which is a metered energy and power technology. So one of the examples that I think about quite often is this of a what cathedrals, what we call cathedrals, and perhaps their intended purposes. So of course we understand the religious aspects to a cathedral and the reasoning for why they were built. Um, I mean, living in Perth, so I live in Perth, Australia. We obviously don't have much in the way of historical understanding from our built infrastructure, but I've been very fortunate to travel to many different parts of the world, and especially in Europe. Cathedrals are just an incredible monument, artifacts that uh, just are absolutely awe-inspiring. And unfortunately, during World War II, quite a lot of them were destroyed. But when we look at the name of a cathedral, it has its relative term with cathode. So one of a theory that I had, and many other people have too, but one of the things that I've thought about is, if we come from well, previously we're in a free energy society, how would that free energy work? Like how would the transmission of the energy work? Both the conducing of it, is that a word? Conductive nature of it, and also the transmission of it work. Like how would that work in the understanding that we have of a world that was built sort of very similar to this at the time, with where you'd have a cathedral as a main sort of centerpiece of a city or a town, with these incredible buildings, many of them with their own like domed roofs, uh, antenna, etc., spires. We'll call it. We'll even call it a common phrase is antiquitech. So this technology that comes from a place of antiquity. So this is sort of the rationale behind what it would be. So you would have let's go back to what a cathode is to start with. So a cathode is in electrical systems is part of a circuit where electrical current enters a device. So in a cathedral would be the cathode, the main body of the entrance to the current. You have the spires or towers, which are like the antenna, and then you have the grounding or earth connection. So we already know these cathedrals were incredibly sophisticated technologies. Master builders who are building these things. If you've been fortunate enough to ever visit, I'm going to share some photos recently. I went back through and had sort of a look at some of my old uh, um, vacation photos or travel photos, I should say. And yeah, it was cool to go back in and look at, especially once through Europe, especially to see the immensity of these buildings and the design. And I wish I had known back then sort of what I know now in regards to design, architecture, also this theory. But I'm sure I'll get a chance one day to go back and revisit it with fresh eyes. So um, the cathedrals, they represent the mastery of structural engineering, acoustic design, geometry, symbolic architecture, and symmetry, I'll say here. Symmetry, not symmetrical, but they were very symmetrical buildings, which is very important in the dispersion of power. These builders had advanced knowledge of harmonic proportions, geometry, light control, and sound amplification. So, so there's a couple of different theories of how this could have worked. So one theory would be through ground transmission, where basically you'd have the cathedral attracting in the energy through these spires, and then having it travel in and through grounding through the earth, and then into the surrounding buildings. Um, so you'd have a distribution basically through the ground or to another central point, which was then distributed to buildings around, potentially again through the ground or through the earth. So much more of a Tesla style setup. So yeah, the second method would be that instead of through the ground, you would have the transmission straight from the cathedral or the cathode itself out through to the surrounding buildings. So what I wanted to do next is show just some examples of how it relates to some of the transmission that we have these days. So you'd have on buildings that surrounded these cathedrals, in many images that we see throughout this old world, shall we call it, you would have these spires with antenna that look very similar to the type of transmission that we use today in our transformers. Cathedral. A cathode is a type of electrode through which electrons move. Electrodes are a semiconductor, usually metal, that is connected to something that is not metal. Cathode delivers electrons, negative charge, and the anode collects electrons that have a positive charge. Here's a diagram of that connection through to and how it would translate through some of the engineering that we see in the buildings that we have seen from these old world. And there's a lot of different artwork as well, which depicts this theory of this etheric conducting of energy through the atmosphere, and then having it brought into a central point, which is then distributed out to different parts of a town or building. Some images that I've found that I think are very fascinating is so if we come from this free energy society that didn't use biomass or biofuel for its energy, so the narrative is that a lot of coal was used, wood, etc., to heat homes from sort of in 17, 18, 1900s until we had electricity come through. Yeah, there was like times where kerosene was brought in there as well and introduced. But um, if in fact we did have a civilization that used some sort of free energy conductivity and transmission distribution, how would that potentially work? And there's many photos that can be found on the internet of what we would describe, what we know as fireplaces. To me, when I look at this is an example of a potential way that this was used that has been lost. And then the it's not like we've evolved from a period of like burning wood up and through to having like our gas heaters um, uh, or split system heaters in our homes, potentially, or radiators or wherever it is, depending on where you're from. Potentially, we had some type of higher technology that was lost. We had to go back to burning wood and coal, and then we've built ourselves from back up from them. So from 150 years ago. But the idea with this method is there's many images of what we would call fireplaces with two objects sitting just outside with some sort of plate on the backing. So the idea would be that in this theory is that energy would be transmitted from a central point, whether it's a cathedral or some type of other building that acted as like a cathode, through to an antenna on a home. That would be then transmitted down the tower, what we would call it, the chimney stack, through to come down the backing of the plate and then discharge out into these two objects at the front here. And that would create, it would be like an ionizing effect that would create warmth and heat that would then heat the house. So you would have heating that was carried out through an ionizing method that didn't require the burning of wood. It's another image, again, showing the two objects. See if this goes through the other side. Yep. So you can see in these images, there's not one, none of them show any charring of smoke, black smoke. It's all very clean, would be the word to describe it. This looks like French chimney. So again, the two objects in the front, you have a backing plate that runs up and back through the chimney or the cavity, shall we say, in this, and then through to these two objects that would create a circuit effectively to ionize the air and create heat. All right, so when I was going through, I was picking out different subjects to look at for this. I wanted to have a look at some of the photos that I'd had to show how this may have been represented as well. I've also got, where are they? What I do, so this would be like a typical method. So you'd have the energy being conducted, so distributed from a cathedral or slash cathode, and then come be adjoined or transmitted through the antenna and then down through the house to provide the energy required. There's many images from the 1800s of firstly just, again, these incredible buildings. They're all getting around on horse and cart, as you can see here. Mud roads, but quite a lot of them you can see have these sort of transmission towers, shall we say. There's no lines anywhere. Again, through here as well, these type of towers. This one you can see there is like transmission lines at the back here. But again, same sort of style. We have the buildings with the domes, the spires. Again, incredibly built, ornate buildings. Getting around on horse and cart. It's Market Street. I wish I knew where this was. I can't think of where it might be. Another example. And in all through the World's Fairs images, there's photos and images of these sort of spire towers that look like antennas. Again, we'd call antiquitech. So some of the photos I brought out, going back to the cathedral hypothesis. This is in Bratislava, in Slovakia. So this would be an example of some sort of central point within a town with a antenna connection that would then transmit. I think this might have been a water tower, perhaps, or something like that. That would then it would attract the energy, and then the energy would be used for whatever operation was going on. So if this is a water tower, perhaps that would be the pump, as an example. I just want to go through some of these images. So this is Budapest in Hungary. So this is, you can see two cathedrals, one on the river and then one set back a little bit. Just incredible buildings, and you can imagine how majestic that would have been. Although Budapest, along with Prague, actually did quite well. That was sort of salvaged and not damaged as much in World War I and II. You can see the symmetry of these buildings as well. It looks very much to me like it'd be very similar to, like, a lot of power stations were built on rivers and oceans, etc. So like this one reminds me a lot of the old power station in London that's now the Tate Modern. Very, very similar sort of setup. That's I think the Budapest Parliament building. Just incredible architecture. I only showing this image because I just love the photo. I just love Budapest. Is just an amazing city that has done. It's fortunately been able to manage to keep quite a lot of their buildings. This cathedral here, I had to take it in 2 photos because it's so large. Although I could have done it in portrait, I suppose. This was taken a long time ago. This is this building here in the background. Incredible. You notice that one of the things when I was studying this and the potential for the use of these as energy receivers, atmospheric energy receivers, then into distributors, was the importance of symmetry and how symmetrical these buildings are. If you wanted to have an even distribution of energy from any type of distributor, then symmetry is vitally important. And you can see the importance of, we can see the incredible design and symmetry of some of these buildings. I think this one was in, this might have been Budapest again. But it looks very similar. Like some of these, if you've seen my previous videos of the World's Fairs, old World's Fairs, again, you can see just the similarity in the architecture and the design all the way through. Whether it was Europe, America, they had the same design, same architecture. This is the Cologne Cathedral. I think I don't know what the name of it is, but yeah, just again, an incredible structure. Like, I understand these were different times and we had these master builders and the economics of it as well was very different as well, to be able to build these amazing structures. Something that friends and I talk about quite a bit and have done recently especially is the absolute slop that's built these days in modern buildings. We live in a fiat monetary system that incentivizes things to be built as quickly as possible. So that often means has to be very, very plain and easy to construct. Whereas when we came from what we would describe as perhaps the golden era, or where we came from a society or civilization, either that was had a sound money system or some sort of free energy technology, we were able to design, plan for, plan for, we'd say, be strategic about, design and construct some of these types of buildings, which we would never do today. We just don't have the economic incentive to do it. That's going to be a subject of another podcast episode I'm going to do around the economics of this of these buildings. Again, you can see the symmetry in them, just absolutely insane. I'm just showing, this is just a representation showing the sizes when I show this. So this cathedral, 157.31 meters in height. This is also, I remember from a tour I did of it, it also represents different building periods as well, building times. So you have the Gothic nature, obviously, you have Greco-Roman type influences throughout it as well. But yeah, it's just an incredible structure. Absolutely insane. I'm showing this image only because I don't know why. It's just this one here. I'm going to bring it up now, just because I was looking at some of the images I wanted to show, and I just want to. This is just like a terrible look I've got, but you can see the perspective and the scope of the Cologne Cathedral in the background as it relates to the rest of the town. It's quite incredible. This photo, I believe, was in Berlin, so this would be another example of where the buildings would have these dome structures, some sort of antiquitech which has been removed. I'm sure you'd find images of this building from 100, 150 years ago, and there'd be different types of antenna coming off it, which, yeah, isn't needed these days, as most of our transmission is through wires and often underground now. But again, you can also see the similarities between these buildings and what we see from the World's Fairs buildings as well. It's the exact same architecture, exact same design. So you can imagine dozens of these buildings in these World's Fairs throughout the US and Europe as well, in this type of construction, and then they've just gone through and destroyed them afterwards. Like, can you imagine if they did that today to these buildings? If they just said, "Oh, actually, sorry guys, these are actually temporary. They're only actually made from plaster and jute fiber, but given that, we're going to destroy them." Again, you can see dome structures. I believe this is Berlin as well. Just incredible. This is in, where is this? Vienna. This was another cathedral. Again, I wish when I was here visiting these places, I had the same sort of lens that I have now. I would have a very different perspective on these cathedrals. But you can sort of, if you need to suspend belief a little bit and just imagine these as energy conducting mechanisms or infrastructure artifacts within a town, then you can really see and start to understand what the importance of the construction methodology would be for energy transmission. That was the last one. So yeah, that's the end of that episode, looking at potential reasons why these buildings were destroyed. They represented and were an artifact of a civilization that were able to use and utilize atmospheric energy to then disperse throughout a town and city in a manner that was free, and with what seems to be no moving parts as well, which is another big factor of it. There's no turbines required. It's all the conducting of the energy is all through architectural design and harmonics. Actually, one thing I wanted to though bring up, and as a fourth point to this, to to round it out. And it is a consideration that needs to be given as well to these World's Fairs. There is no, what should we say, there's no credible historical or archaeological evidence supporting the cathode theory with this. So we don't have any literature, no indigenous tales, no working images of how this was work. So there's a couple of things that maybe point out to this, but and also to add, yeah, historians and engineers point out that the medieval builders who constructed these, there's documentation of the contracts, payments, etc., construction drawings, etc. So a couple of things that this may be. One, that these were actually, the timeline that we're given for the construction of these buildings is actually much older. So similar to the World's Fairs, when we've been told they were built in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they actually built 500, 600,000 years previous. But just given just the incredible design and construction methodology behind these buildings, they were able to last a long time, along with renovations, etc., which I believe is what happened with the World's Fairs. These buildings were actually there for a long, long, long time. The 2 to 3 year period that they've told us was used to construct the buildings is actually the period that was used to renovate the buildings and the surrounds. Or the second option is that there was some sort of mass type cover up where a lot of the literature was recreated, perhaps. That's a very time consuming type effort. A friend of mine actually, and you'll probably listen to this, well, he introduced an interesting idea that I thought of, like, in the same manner that these buildings were destroyed, burned down, we potentially had a lot of books and documentation burned at the same period of time as well, to cover up this potential previous history that we had throughout, up until the late 19th century, the late 1800s. Because if you think about it, it stands to reason if they went to the effort to destroy these buildings through there's 3 methods. Again, the World's Fairs, the understanding that they were temporary structures and designed to be destroyed afterwards. So that's one, in America especially. 2 was these great fires that went through various cities throughout America. And then 3 is in Europe with the World Wars. So these were destroyed by carpet bombing, many of these cities and many of these structures. That if they were doing that, then it's also very simple to go burn a whole bunch of books as well, and different literature and documentation around potentially what was occurring back then. This also, I'm just thinking now, also gets into the Zeppelin idea, and the blimps, etc., which is a form of transportation that was around in those times as well, and potentially what was going on then as well. So yeah, that's it. Love this image. I just really wanted to create an image that gives some sort of understanding and perspective, like how this could have worked. And before I wrap up, I just want to show one more, that how this could have been created and dispersed through, where do I have it? I don't have it saved. That's all right. Yeah. All right. Cool. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me for this episode. And I'll see you next time. Also, if you have any comments and questions, love to hear them. I love the feedback, and sort of investigating this theory. It's something that doesn't seem to be going away. More and more people are talking about it, which is cool. It's interesting. Whether it's all true or not, I'm not 100% sure, but something is sus. Where there's smoke, there's fire, all the rest of it. And it's just an interesting topic to think and talk about. All right. Thanks very much, everybody.